So it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Roger Hanlon. Dr. Hanlon is a world-renowned ethologist and cephalopod expert whose work focuses on how these incredible animals use rapid color change and camouflage to survive, communicate, and outsmart their predators. If you've ever wondered how an octopus can vanish before your eyes or why cuttlefish are basically the chameleons of the sea, I think you're in for a treat. His research takes him everywhere from deep sea expeditions to high tech labs. And tonight he's bringing that knowledge straight to us. He's on the East Coast, so it's 3 hours later. Yeah. And so let's welcome Dr. Hanlon. Floor is yours. Oh, and one last thing. If you have questions, we're going to ask that you put them in the chat and I will handle them from there.
Okay, Barbara and everyone, can you see the screen okay?
We can.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for attending, and I hope things come out all right with everyone who've been following the drama from here as well. So but let's have some fun for a little while. You see this long title, but basically we're going to talk about color change in these animals, as Barbara just explained. And I'm a diving biologist. I do a lot of field work. I do lab experiments too, but the field work really is where we've got most of our inspiration and our good ideas. So most of our discoveries have come from diving, and I'm a very proud and avid member of the Boston Sea Rovers, which is the oldest dive club in America. But let's go diving right away. Here you see a back reef area. There's just a rock there and a fish swimming around. There's not much happening in this scene till now. There was an octopus there the whole time as I approached it, and now it jets away and inks in my face. And if we look at that in slow motion reverse, you see smooth white skin, and watch the ring around the eye, the dark ring. That's 5 million little spots, chromatophores innervated directly from the brain. Another 25 million spots in the skin will create the camouflage pattern. And watch the 3D projections on the skin. It goes from smooth skin to what we call papillate skin. And the camouflage is really spectacular. I mean, it's right there, you know where it is, but you still can't see it. So we're trying to understand how these animals do this. And it really is an enigma to try and figure out how this is all working. Before and after is dramatically different. But the animal can also go in the top right to a more developed coral reef and still be camouflaged, or a fully developed coral reef. And it can go anywhere on any background in the ocean. And it, within an eye blink, 1/5 of 1 second, can look at the background, figure out the right camouflage pattern, and put it on. So it's a really marvelous capability. And so we call this rapid adaptive coloration, and there are lots of patterns. If you look at this cuttlefish that I filmed in Australia, look at the skin details, the roving patterns of darkness, and their transverse lines and their spots and everything else. So they have wonderful control of their skin. Here it changes color just a little bit to sort of yellow, then it just plops down on the bottom and becomes another piece of coral. So here are two squids on a Caribbean coral reef. There's a male on the left and a female on the right. He's been fighting other males to court with the female. So as this fight continues, see the two males fighting here, and they're doing it by color patterns. Kind of a gentlemanly fight going on here, where they don't really bite each other very much, but they're showing each other which has the most dynamic skin. And the female will allow the winner to come and swim with her, and hopefully this will lead to a mating later on. So it's a very elegant, sophisticated system. And so here you see the male on the left is showing a brown pattern, a courtship pattern to the female on the right, and a fighting pattern on the white side. Now watch what he does when the female changes places. He twists his pattern fluidly so that she's always seeing the lovey-dovey courtship pattern, because if he shows her the white aggressive pattern, she'll hit the road, and he will have wasted about 8 hours dating her. And so you see that this signaling for color change is also very important as well, and very, very well developed. Here's an octopus on an Okinawa coral reef. It's just very conspicuous, and it's parked right in front of me, and it just looks like another rock. So it's really pretty effective camouflage. There's the change right there, and that was in real time. And so there are lots of optical illusions going on here. The animal goes from highly conspicuous to highly camouflaged. So that skin has a pattern, a color, it's got 3D texture. All of it is instantly changeable, and most of it is controlled by their eyes. They visually look around the background and can make this hard decision about what to turn themselves into. Now, here's the cuttlefish really going kind of crazy towards a crab prey, and that's real time as well. So if you got something controlled directly from the brain, you can do things really fast. Here is the giant Australian cuttlefish. Also, this is in southern Australia. That animal is, half a meter long, and it's very conspicuous, but it'll just drop down to the bottom and look like this, and it's really hard to see. It's absolutely in the middle of your picture there, and there it is in the box right there. Doesn't look much like the cuttlefish on the left, right? I'll blow that up for you, and now you can really see it very well. But can you see it really well? This is, I don't know if you can see my cursor. This is the cuttlefish, and here's an eye right here, and there's an eye right there. These are the arms, but they have really done a fabulous job, even when full framed, of not looking anything like a cuttlefish. And so this is really quite a capability. So do a lot of diving on, photography and video is how we quantify a lot of our data. You can see the massive cameras I have when I'm usually traveling, and here I am all duded up in my dry suit with cameras and spectrometers and videotapes. And there are lots of things. I've done a lot of work with underwater vehicles like these right here. And we do a lot of lab work shown in the bottom here, where we have cuttlefish and octopus and squid in our lab to do specific experiments. But I want to point out that the human eye down here is still one of the most important tools we have. Our ability to see things and understand what's going on when we're fully immersed down there in the world of the animals and not our air world. It really helps us understand things a lot better. Now, where do I go to study color? And the answer is wherever I can find the animals to answer a specific question I'm after. So I don't really like to travel all this much, but I do because that's where the animals are. So doesn't matter where it is. I've dived warm and cold water and coral reefs, you name it, seagrass. We've been in all of it over the years. Been doing this for a long time. I want to point out a new technology that's come on board. It's called hyperspectral imaging. And basically, we're trying to understand what the color world looks like in the eye of the fish or the cephalopod, because our vision is not what other animals have. They actually can see more than we can. So we've done some liveaboard work. This is Pendito in Indonesia, and we've done liveaboard trips, 2 of them, sort of near Lembeh and Raja Ampat, if you're familiar with those areas in Indonesia. And this is why we went there, because of all of these beautiful coral reefs in a very remote part of the world, and it's also the center of marine biodiversity. So if any of you ever get a chance to go to that part of the world, it's really worthwhile because there's a higher diversity of life than there is anywhere else on the planet, at least underwater. But here we are doing some of the work with teams of scientists, but I do a lot of citizen science, and we take volunteers who come along on these trips, and they carry out a lot of the duties to help us find animals and get other visual data. And then a team of scientists like these right here. This is myself with one of these big cameras to get these data. So it's one way to get some field work done. And then we try to visualize this. This is where the science comes in, and it's very, I'll say it's cutting edge because no one's ever done this before. We're trying to understand how animals with different color vision, like a colorblind animal on the left, or an animal that only has 2 color receptors or 3. We are trichromats. We have red, green, and blue, your RGB screens. There's some animals like diving birds have 4 color receptors in their eyes, so their color discrimination is really spectacular compared to what we can see. And with this camera, we're able to get images with a lot more color other than the 3 colors on all of our instruments, red, green, and blue. Our imager has 16 colors throughout the whole visible range. So that's one of the projects we're doing. And there's a lot of diving involved in that. Just beginning to figure out how that all works. Very high tech. I just want to put this in perspective. You'd say an octopus is smart. Oh, well, how old is this animal group, and how does it fit into the whole scene of evolution? And here you see over here, we've got the mammals. There we are. Here are the cephalopods over here on the left. And who's the common ancestor of those two groups was 600 million years ago. I've got to tell you, the cephalopods have been around a lot longer than we have in the ocean. But the amazing thing is that certainly mammals and reptiles have complex behavior, but the cephalopods also have complex behaviors, but they have evolved in such a remotely different way. And the question is whether or not their brain structure is fundamentally different. And we're trying to work on that because the folks who do AI, the artificial intelligence community, they only have one model for intelligence that they use, and that's we humans. But when I give talks about this, the AI people show up and they go, "Yes, I hope the cephalopods can do that because we need another model for intelligence to model ourselves with." Probably the kind of subject you don't think about very often, but that's a pretty big subject these days. So the octopus is a really unusual animal. You can see the diagram here. And what's unusual about it, right in the middle, it's got this big brain, CNS, that central nervous system. It's got 80 million neurons in there. Okay, that's a big brain. But what's crazy down here is that in the rest of the body, including all of these 8 arms and the 200 suckers on every arm, there are 300 million neurons. This is really bizarre that they would have so many more neurons throughout their body as opposed to their brain. Uh, but that's the way it is. And you can dissect out this brain. That's a true brain dissected out right here on the left, and on the right of the diagram. There are 34 lobes of that brain. This is not a snail. This is a really complicated animal right from the brain on down. So there's a lot of sophistication that you would expect from the good old octopus. And there are two newly discovered oddities that really have changed our view of these animals. The one is that the genome has finally been done of octopus, and it turns out that it's absolutely enormous. The genome is comparable in size almost to the human genome. Now, there are a lot of big genomes around, but for an invertebrate animal, this is a monster of a surprise. And furthermore, they do this thing called RNA editing. We probably know roughly what DNA is. DNA sends a code out to an RNA, and the RNA creates a protein, and protein makes everything. That's what your body's made of. But most animals, they just go from DNA to RNA, including humans, and then there's a protein. These crazy animals can edit their RNA, and they do it at an accelerated level more than any animal that's been analyzed so far. And that means that they can change their proteins and how they're built very, very readily. So this animal is so goofy, but it's also extraordinary. So keen vision. If you can change color, how do you control that? So they look at that big eye on the squid right here. The octopus has a very good eye as well. And vision is guiding this capability. They can look at the background, or they can look at another squid or octopus, and they can decide what to do. And the brain is right in between those two eyes. And then if you're going to change your appearance, you've got to have some pretty cool skin. Human skin is very boring by comparison because we can't change it except for goosebumps or a sunburn or a blush. These animals have extraordinary skin that can do all kinds of things with pigments and reflectors. But I want to point out that this color change that we're talking about, it's not a simple reflex. This is decision making by a complex brain. There are all kinds of decisions have to be made very rapidly. And so it's a very sophisticated system. And the chameleon, everyone knows about the chameleon, but I like chameleons a lot, and we study them a little bit, but they're dead boring compared to the cephalopod. They just don't have the same speed of change or diversity. Okay, so where is it taking us? We took the animals in the lab. We're trying to figure out how a cuttlefish or an octopus looks at the background and can put on the right camouflage pattern. So in the laboratory, here we have a little cuttlefish in the middle. On the left, we give it some different background, which we control. And then we look at the output, which is what the animal looks like, the skin pattern. And so if we put the animal in a uniform pattern, it's got that pattern right there, which is a uniform pattern. If we put a checkerboard down on the bottom, the animal looks at the checkerboard And it's not trying to look like a checkerboard, but it's using that visual information to put on a different pattern, which we call a mottled pattern. And now we just amp up that checkerboard to a big checkerboard, which is brighter and larger and has sharp edges. And the animals have changed dramatically to something we call disruptive coloration. So there's uniform mottled disruptive. And so visually, they're doing this with a very simple mechanism. And basically, we have figured out how an octopus or cuttlefish goes out in nature. And within less than a second, they can analyze complex visual scenes, pick up one or two cues, and put the right camo pattern on. This is a very unintuitive, very sophisticated system. And you can imagine that every soldier out there, every policeman who has camouflage would like to have this ability. And so we're working on that process, trying to understand it better. So here's a very bright cuttlefish, and it just was all bright white. It just turns off the bright white, kind of hunkers down in the sand and disappears. So before and after is pretty dramatic. That was real time. Now in the laboratory, here's a cuttlefish on a sandy bottom, looking sandy. Now we pull the rug out from under it very rudely, and there's a different bottom. The animal is moving around, looking at that bottom. We really upset it. This is real time, but it stops and turns on a different pattern, sort of a mottled pattern. And now what we do, rather than let it settle too much, you'll see from the top right, our special talented three-handed technician rolls in these white rocks, and the animal looks to the white rocks and moves and puts on what we call a disruptive pattern, where it's putting on the equivalent of little white rocks on its body so that it's a random sample of the other part of the background. So this is all visually controlled, and we've worked out that rule set in great detail. So I won't bore you with this, but we have done a lot of experiments on this, summarized in this paper right here. And basically what we've done, don't get lost in this one, just want to point out that, there's visual input up here, there's visual processing in the brain selects a pattern, it generates a pattern, and then there's an output. And we know exactly on the bottom row here, exactly which parts of the brain are doing that. Now, it also took 10 years, 800 animals, and 30 experiments to give you that little line, but we're very proud of having figured that out. So what about the skin? This is a close-up through a microscope of the skin, and you see the yellow, red, and brown dots opening and closing. Those are chromatophores, and they're controlled directly from the brain. A nerve fiber goes from the brain all the way out to the skin, to each of these spots in the skin. And it's really the fastest you can make anything happen. We did this for a TV program. You see a yellow chromatophore, and you see these muscles attached to it. The 5 of them are shown here. When those muscles contract, they pull that little bag of pigment granules out into a yellow disc of color. And that's basically the mechanism that makes the skin change down there at the microscope level. And underneath the pigmented chromatophores are these bright iridescent colors too. You ever see a live squid sometime, you'll see these, yellow and blue iridescent cells. So with those 2 skin layers, they can show every artist color that there is, and they can control it all. So how do they do it? We've done a lot of work on those individual chromatophores, and you see this chromatophore moving around. There's you can see a framework in the back. You can measure how much it's moving. But the whole point is, the skin of this animal is all soft, like an octopus or squid, and it maintains its color coherency even when the skin is stretched or bundled up. And if you're going to make a shirt that changes color, and that technology is not here yet, you've got to work on this color coherency, and the squid can show us how to do that. That's why we're doing this sort of thing. So we look at sort of an buyer-inspired approach to making things that change colors. So all the grant work we've been doing in the last decade or two, we have engineers and material scientists working with us. So here's one of the questions: how do we make paints and clothes that change color, or something that'll change the color of your car or your cosmetics? And so here, looking at the chromatophore, where you have a little dot in the middle, and then it expands out into a disc of color. Some of our colleagues up in Boston have actually patented that and trying to make things. And we were asked to do an article in an information display technology magazine years ago. And this has really blossomed now. There's a lot of this work going on big time looking at animals that change color. Now there's no iridescence in this picture, and the iridescent spots show up out of nowhere. We're stimulating the skin, and here comes the iridescence. And notice the color shift here, where it goes from no color to red all the way over to green and blue. That's the whole color spectrum. And so this iridescent color can be controlled chemically, which is really quite amazing. So there's this protein in the skin called reflectin that causes that color. And we have colleagues who have taken squid and they've gotten those iridescent cells and they've extracted the protein out of that called reflectin. And they have made all kinds of things like artificial chromatophores and bobomimetic chromatophores. And they've taken this reflectin and they've made new kinds of optoelectronics. And they've even used the reflectin protein out of a squid to make neural stem cell growth, which is mind-boggling. It's like a medical application from a squid iridescent cell. So this era of biotechnology is really extraordinary, and a lot of our field work has enabled this. So I show a picture of a smartphone. All of us own one of these, for better or for worse. And I ask you basically, where does the color come from in your smartphone? It's got a battery in there, which doesn't last all that long each day. It's got a computer, which costs a fortune. And when the sunlight comes out, you can't see the screen because, the ambient light is overwhelming the light coming out of this. My point is that our animals, the octopus and the squid and the cuttlefish, they can show all of the colors on your smartphone, but they don't make any colors internally. They're taking the available light that's there and they are reflecting that light to get all the patterns. So they're doing with pigments, like the chromatophore, and with reflectors. And with these two things, these two cells in the body, they can really manipulate light very, very well. And we would propose that this is a really different route to inspire synthetic materials to change. So here's some white cells in the bottom, and I'm taking my electrode and I'm touching the skin in between and then on top of the white spot. And you can see those spots in the skin are all electrically coupled so that if you stimulate one place, you obscure the white bit, or if you tap on top of them or in between them, you accentuate it. So, starting to make materials like that based on the animal is really sort of a speedy way to figure things out. So these so-called leucophores, which are the white bits, this is the whitest white that's ever been measured in nature from any material or animal, and it's found in a cuttlefish of all things. And so why does this animal have the whitest white, and who cares? Well, this is the whitest white. Anyone in the audience who's a physicist will see that, the visible range from 400, the blue colors, to the red colors. Our animal is producing all colors, that's what white is, at the highest possible level. You have the whitest white in the animal kingdom. And we have worked out, the architecture shown here of the individual cells down in the skin. And we have made models of that right here, all these little white spheres, and we've measured it and modeled it. And so who cares? Well, you can emulate that and you can make stuff, and people have made stuff. But one of the things you could do with this maybe is you can make a better Kindle, because this material is reflecting the available light at a very high efficiency rate. Whereas the Kindle, your black and white Kindle you read from, is only about 40% efficient to reflect the light that's available. Our animals are 95% efficient reflecting light. So we discovered all these crazy things in our animals. Maybe this could also act as a makeup base, and there are people testing that right now. And they might even be good to be a sunscreen because it's a natural protein and would not irritate the skin. So there's some crazy stuff going on when you look at let's say, the mechanisms of how these animals change color. And there's a lot of optical diversity. You see a cuttlefish on the bottom left and squid on the right, and here close-ups of the skin. And that is optical diversity. You have every color of the rainbow, and some of it's pigmentary, and some of it is reflective. So this is right up there. This is like a peacock on drugs. They can change all these colors. The peacock can't change any of their colors. They have a lot of them, but they're stuck with them. These animals turn them on and off with impunity. Now, of all things, I got invited to give a talk at the company Estee Lauder. Most of you will have known what that company is. It's all about cosmetics. And I sat there and talked about, I see the title of my talk up there in the top left, Nature's Cosmetic Champion, the Octopus's Garden of Dynamically Changeable Colors. And so I pointed out to them that if they want to be on top of the cosmetic industry in the next decade, they need to figure out how to get pigments and reflectors into the skin that can change color and the individual can control it. How cool would that be? It would feed human vanity to a long way. And here's a close-up of the skin of a cuttlefish, and you just see this very subtle, beautiful, mild blushing. The control of the skin, down to the tiniest level is really extraordinary. And that's why we're pretty sure that eventually this could be used for something even like cosmetics. But there are many other medical applications that would be, more important and just as good. We also got together with the folks who make electronic screens, just like the one you're looking at right now with your laptop. And could they make a screen in which the pixels operate sort of like the chromatophores in a squid or an octopus? And so we got together with all of these authors. Some of them are biologists, but some of them are, display technology people who make screens like this. And we compared all the things that they do and found, they took the things that the octopus does real well and technology can't do, and they're looking at ways to stimulate new ways to figure that out for the technology. I want to get back to the color change because here's the octopus again. In this case, I really want to concentrate on the smooth skin to the bumpy skin. And so here's a close-up of a giant Australian cuttlefish with smooth skin, and it's like periscope up, and you see these bumps. And now I got really close to it, and you see from smooth skin, this bump out of nowhere is created there. And this is really malleable skin. It's kind of like your tongue. It's called a muscular hydrostat. And there's no technology, human technology, that can do soft material change in shape with controls at every degree of expansion. And so this turned into some work that we did, but I'm going to first show you how dramatic this can be. This is a giant Australian cuttlefish. This animal is more than 1/2 meter long. Notice that it's bright white, it's very conspicuous, and it has smooth skin. And I didn't have a video camera, I had a still camera. I just shot as fast as I could, 1 second per shot. And when you see what happens is the animal goes 1 second, 2, 3, 4, 5, and in 5 seconds, it's turned into a piece of seaweed, and now it's coming back out of it. And you can see how dramatically it can change not only the color and the pattern, but also the three-dimensional texture. So how do those bumps work? Well, don't bother reading all this. The point is that in a very good science journal, we published with folks from Cornell the first ever soft material that could be controlled. And it was all based right here in figure A, showing one of these papillae, one of the bumps in the skin of an octopus. The whole mechanism was duplicated with these soft materials by these very smart material scientists. So there's a lot of applied science going on here, not just camouflage for DOD or police and others or hunters, but also this sort of thing where you can get skin and materials and that can change their 3D texture. So looking back at changeable complexions, we can look for the oceans, for instance, for inspiration. There's a lot of dynamic masking of harsh edges, lots of gradations of color and contrast. And this is the key thing. It's pigments and reflectors is what animals are doing. And the peacock uses pigments and reflectors, but it's only a few fishes and our cephalopods that really do it under dynamic control. But I really point this out that the ocean is an absolutely untapped gold mine of biodiversity for color and pattern and bioinspiration. And no one is looking. I'm just amazed at this. People have to get out there and really start paying attention to what some of these animals are doing and how capable they are. And it's really important here, I'll say it again, these animals are not making new light, they are manipulating available light. And there are a lot of applications for that in humans too. And as far as we know, that shape-shifting skin that I showed you, the bumps in the cuttlefish and the octopus, that's the only animal on the planet that has developed that capability. And you can imagine a Navy submarine that would have smooth skin to go fast through the water, but when it wants to stop and get camouflage, it could put bumps all over it, you know. But if you want to go fast, you can't have bumps. All kinds of animals in the ocean and on land that have bumps all over, but they can't go very fast in the water. So, you know, a squid or a cuttlefish or octopus can use the bumps for camouflage, and then they just flatten them and they jet propel away and they go fast through the water. So there's a lot of method to the madness. Okay, so art and science, you know, color and pattern, that's what artists are really good at. And so here's the same cuttlefish on the left, highly camouflaged and highly conspicuous. I want to point out that they're manipulating these 6 features. They're manipulating the light in their skin, the shape, the edges, the contrast, the color, and the texture. But a lot of people do that. Artists do it, photographers do it, architects do it, makeup artists do it, marketing, advertising, like the golden arches for McDonald's. They're all manipulating these 6 features. So artists know really how to do this with great precision. So I have done a lot of work with the art community because they understand color and pattern. I work especially with Rhode Island School of Design here on the East Coast. But this brings together, we actually published this small booklet here on art and science, where I had artists and scientists together to brainstorm commonalities of how you make clothes or cosmetics or other things based on what animals can do. So this brings in, you look at the bottom, you know, there are a lot of things going on here. There's art, biology, microscopy, imaging, modeling, and engineering. So it's very collaborative. Now, look at this octopus perambulating along here. It's camouflaged the right color on the sand. When it gets to this piece of kelp, it turns smooth and goes all red. The deal is, though, that we know that octopuses are colorblind. So how the heck are they doing this? And so this led us down a different path, trying to figure out how you can do color matching when you're colorblind. And so this led us down some different avenues right here. And we thought, could there be light sensors in the skin of an octopus or a cuttlefish that are not in the eye? And so Lydia Mathger and I, you see it at the bottom, we published a paper, 10, 14 years ago, because we looked in the skin of the cuttlefish and we knew what the gene was for one of the opsin molecule that was in the eye, and we found it all throughout the skin. This was a bizarre finding, and I'll just tell you right now, don't bother reading all this. We did almost 6 years of work on this. We found the opsin molecules that are in your retina and my retina, transducing light to create vision. Those same molecules are in the eye of the cuttlefish, and they're all over the skin of these animals. So there is some possibility that these animals can do something with light just with their skin, and it could be sophisticated, but we don't know the answer yet. But a very smart guy named John Rogers, he's underlined in red here, heard me talk about this at a meeting, and he called me and he produced this material here where he said, you guys can't prove how that skin and light business works, but you gave me an idea, and I'm going to make some materials that can sense what's underneath them and change its color and pattern. So down here on the bottom right, part E, I don't know if you can see that. You see U of I, that's University of Illinois. That's a material that they made that had tiny little sensors all throughout each of those little squares, which could sense what was underneath it. So there was no computer or power source. This was just a piece of material that could sense what was underneath it and duplicate it and get the right color pattern. So this was published in a kind of a big time journal too. So it was a case where the biology gave kind of a possible cool idea, but couldn't prove anything, but the smart engineer took it and ran with it. Okay, so a few thoughts to tie up so we can do some questions soon. These are really exciting times in biotechnology, as I tried to allude to. Nature provides, some untouched frontiers of discovery out there, not just the ocean, but in land too. But the oceans in particular are, the biodiversity is yet to be discovered, especially for color. It's just not being studied almost at all. Now, the sensory ecology, what is sensory ecology? Sensory ecology is the study of what sensory capabilities an animal has and how does that affect its ecological functions. for example, an octopus eye is really different from our eye. It can see no color. It can see polarized light, which we're blind to. It can see in the dark, which we're blind to. And so its visual world is dramatically different from ours. So that's part of the sensory ecology. You're not going to understand the animal unless you understand what it does and does not see. And I really point out the field work is really key to understanding. And I don't care if it's diving field work or it's on land, getting out there and immersing into the animal's sensory world is important to figure out how nature works. I'm not a lab-based scientist only. And there's a lot of new technology out there and a lot of basic questions out there. So I just want to acknowledge, these are some of the folks I've worked with over the years. This is very collaborative work. You can see on the left many institutions that we have worked with and are presently working with. We've had a lot of funding from Department of Defense, especially for camouflage, but also from National Geographic and National Science Foundation and so forth. And the bottom, there are a lot of terms that you probably don't care too much about, but the point is that there are a lot of kinds of science going on to study these bigger questions that really we've gotten onto with the inspiration of our animals. And I always like to put this little saying here. It's in the hallway here at the Marine Biological Laboratory where I work in Woods Hole on Cape Cod. Here it is: discovery is to see what everyone has seen, but think what no one has thought. It's really a very nice phrase, and it's got a lot of truth to it. So there's also this nice little saying up at the top here: study nature, not books. That was put in our library here in Woods Hole by Louis Agassiz in 1890. My little marine biological laboratory has been around since 1888. So right in front of this thing was right over the entrance to the library, and he's essentially telling the students not to walk in the library and stay too long, get out in nature and figure out what's going on. So I can sort of end by just saying this: there are other projects and opportunities. And, for questions, if any of you have some, I'm happy to answer anything. But there are a lot of things like if you're a diver and you want to approach an octopus and study it, how do you do that? I'm glad to talk about that right now, if you like. Citizen science projects, we do a lot of citizen science. For those of you who might be bored with what you're doing now, you want to go on a more scientific trip, we can arrange that. There are a lot of field studies that need yet to be done to prove octopus intelligence. There's a lot of hyperbole out there in the internet and television that's a little overdone about how intelligent they are. Yeah, they're pretty keen, but they're things that we need to prove in nature to really nail that down. And by the way, I've done a ton of work on the California squid fishery. I've done a lot of diving on the octopus in your kelp beds right offshore from where you are in Santa Barbara. Done a lot of squid work in Monterey. So I'm open to any questions. And with that, I'll conclude. And thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Roger. That was amazing. Every time I think I know a subject, I find out I don't. So I'm wondering, since you've dove all over the world, do you see significant differences between different locations? Just let's take octopus or squid.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there are a lot of differences. Now, there's a little bit of good news here. I mean, the bad news, the reality is that humans are fishing the ocean so hard that a lot of fisheries have either collapsed or are in the process of collapsing worldwide. And that's the reality. That's not good news. But some animal groups have done all right through that. The squid fisheries, which are all around the world, and some cuttlefish fisheries are in only parts of the world, same with octopus, they're doing okay. And part of it is because these are short-lived, highly mobile animals for the most part. And so luckily at this point in time, they're very fecund, which means that they have a high rate of producing young. And so the cephalopod fisheries are in decent shape. But forget cephalopod fisheries. What about the ecology of octopus on coral reefs and kelp forests? Those animals are doing okay as well, even though they're right in the middle of the food chain. Their camouflage is very effective, and their speed is very effective. And so they themselves are predators. But their niche, in a coral ecosystem or whatever, seagrass, whatever it is, these animals are so adaptable. I mean, uh, believe it or not, all the way back in the Cambrian, the very beginning of life on Earth, when it was all oceans, the cephalopods dominated all those oceans. And it wasn't until fishes came along much later that the fishes took over the ocean. And that's kind of where we are today. Fishes are sort of winning the game of evolution right now, but there's cephalopods all around the world, and they've even survived mass extinctions. So, the cephalopods have something going for them. So, I don't know if that answers your question exactly, Barbara, but there is some good news there about the cephalopods.
Okay, I want to invite other people to come off mute. That's probably the easiest way. If you have a question, just go ahead and come off mute and ask your question.
And I'm going to stop sharing. There's nothing to share here. So,
Yeah, thank you. And I was wondering, are there any predators that can see through their camouflage?
oh yeah, I mean, I think that's really a good question. There are, boy, some of the predators have phenomenally good vision. So, for example, a lot of their predators can see at night. They can see polarization aspect of light. Some of them have visual acuity and color. The color perception, in particular, some of the animals have such good color vision that they can pull out the color of the animal versus its background.
Hmm.
So, the evolutionary race of predator and prey is still going on all the time, and so there's a lot there.
Wow, it's just so amazing. I mean, I knew about the color changing and all that, but I mean, how does that really all work together? You have like a simple
Hmm.
answer. If they
Well,
didn't have eyes, it sounds like it doesn't matter because they have essentially sensory eyes in their skin. Yeah.
Well, we didn't prove that last part. They really need the eyes. When you blind one of these animals, or they get an eye infection or something, if one of their eyes is still working, they can still do the camo and the other things. But if both eyes go bad, the skin can change color, but it's not coordinated with anything. It's always the wrong color
Hmm.
for whatever they're doing. And so the visual input is really key. So they need their eyes. They're very, very visual animals, and they have a very good visual system, but they can regulate the skin, mainly done by vision.
Wow. There's a question from David. Have you ever had any friendly interactions with octopuses like the My Octopus Teacher movie, etc.?
Uh, yes, but I'm not going to use the word friendly. I have, well, I've done 4,000 research dives, and I've spent huge amounts of time, hundreds and hundreds of hours studying octopus underwater and natural habitats. So yes, I've had all kinds of interactions with them, and I understand their behavior really well. And I know the My Octopus Teacher film inside and out. I've analyzed it. I've talked about it. Done podcasts on it. So yeah, um, yeah, they're very curious animals, and so when you get near them and you approach them slowly and carefully, and they habituate to your presence, now you can have all kinds of interactions. They will reach out, they will touch you, and they're going to touch you because they're trying to taste you and see what you are, because their vision is good, but they don't make their decisions until they use their suckers to their sucker essentially is like your nose, your fingertip, and your tongue and your lips. That's what the sucker of an octopus is. And so when they touch you with that sucker, they are identifying you in many ways that augments the visual recognition. So they're very, very tactile, chemically oriented animals. Kind of like your dog, the smelling capability of a dog can smell 2,000 things, and you can only do a few hundred. The octopus is the same way. What it senses with its suckers is beyond comprehension of what a human can do. So, those interactions, I've had them many times. Octopuses habituate to my presence. They go out and they forage all over, and then I film them, uh, keeping a discrete distance. And that way I get catalogs of all their natural behavior. So that's the field technique that you use. You can't be a you can't do it quickly. You can't go underwater and just approach an animal and take a picture and think that you figured it out. It doesn't work like that. The octopuses know exactly whether you're a threat or not, and they won't show you their normal behavior until you do your homework. So it takes a lot of time and a lot of patience and a lot of air.
So interacting with them as a diver is an okay thing. Let them interact with us. Like we used to take off our glove. They never seemed to like the glove very much, and we would put a finger down and let the octopus
Mhm.
come to us.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's okay. What you don't want to do, I mean, photographers mishandle octopuses all the time underwater. They pick them up, they throw them in the water column. If you ever see a picture of an octopus in a water column, that's animal abuse, honestly. No octopus wants to be swims up in the water column like that, because as soon as they do it, a barracuda is going to eat them. Octopuses are benthic animals, so don't pick up octopuses and throw them up in the water column, please. And so, handling an octopus is not a good idea. That's roughhousing the animal, and it's very alarmed. And if it thinks at you, it's really alarmed. So if you would just observe the animal from a distance for a while and kind of wait for a while, it'll start foraging and doing its natural stuff. And then you'll really be amazed, because you'll see the color change and you'll see it grab things for food, and it'll do all kinds of sophisticated things. And so it just takes a lot of time to go down there and just let the animal get comfortable with your presence, because you're a potential predator. Most of these octopuses have never seen anything as big as a diver, and they don't know if it's going to eat them or what. It doesn't know about photography. So, again, just respect the animals, and if you have some patience, you'll see a lot more than if you don't. Unfortunately, most divers don't have much patience. So that kind of is the difference with the science.
Understood. Here's a question. How often do the public scientist trips events happen? Where are they usually, and how long do they last, and what are the requirements? How do we get more information about that?
Well, most of these, so there are some organizations that do this, but most of these trips are 7 to 15 days at the most. 2 weeks is about the most that anyone wants to go on any kind of dive trip, because this is a work trip. Some of them are liveaboard dive boats, others go to places where you have a dive resort and they have a good diving operation. So I would say the most typical time is about a 10-day trip, and that gives people enough time to learn something in a day or two about what kind of data they need to get under the guidance of the scientists. And then they go out and they gather data, and every night they get together and look at the data and revise their methods and do that. So, these trips, they're going on off and on. They're probably 4 or 5 a year worldwide that are going on. There might be more than that. You can find out about them by looking at, some dive clubs know about them. And there are some other organizations. Maybe I'll send you a list of them and you can post them
Okay,
somewhere. It'd probably be the best thing to do.
okay. I'll take you up on that. Other questions? Do you have a favorite memory or an interaction out of all of your research? And
Well, yeah, I'll name two of them. One, which actually inspired my career when I was a college student. Um, I went down to Panama during the summer break because my brother was there in the army, and he took me out to a nice clear water place and gave me a snorkel and mask and said, go swim around for a while. And it was like 3 or 4 feet deep, and I just kind of went out there with a snorkel, and it was coral, and something blue water on my stomach. It scared the daylights out of me. I nearly came out of the water. And I circled around and looked back and down in this depression full of beautiful coral and sponges, and I couldn't see anything. So what's going on? And then I just saw a little movement, and the little movement caught my eye. It was the funnel of an octopus, a breathing octopus. The funnel was kind of pulsating as it, sucked water in and pumped it out. And then it just sort of rose up and moved about 2 feet away and then vanished right in front of my eyes. It was at arm's length away and it vanished. And the camouflage was spectacular. And it
hmm,
just blew me away. I never forgot that. And it inspired me to go back to college in my last 2 years and take some invertebrate zoology courses and an animal behavior course. And that was sort of the start of it. Here I am, 50 years later, and I'm still trying to figure out how that octopus did that. So that was one thing. And the other is the video I showed you at the very beginning of this presentation, that video where I would approach that octopus. I knew where that octopus was, the camouflage octopus, but when I approached it and it changed its pattern and inked in my face and jetted away, that one really had a big impact on me. And it actually um, led to a lot of funding because people can look at that and say, that's something we need to learn more about. You know, we need to know how the animal can change its camouflage so quickly. And so those are the two moments that probably had some of the biggest impact on me, in both cases as a diver. And so the diving has really been a major part of my career and my biology. And it
Wow.
still is, by the way.
Other questions? Anyone come on off mute if you'd like. You know, one of the other things that I always think about is how people talk about how smart an octopus is or a cephalopod.
Mhm.
So is it memory? You know, what's going on there? You know, in terms.
Well, it's not memory per se, but the yeah, they have short and long-term memory just like we do, and a lot of animals do. So yeah, they have big brains and they have good memories. But more importantly, they can. There's a thing that a former student of mine did in our lab, and it's called episodic like memory. And the episodic like memory is sophisticated ways that you can use memory. And what episodic memory is, it's where, the what, where, and when feature of any behavior. So what was it? Where did it happen? And the animals can remember that. So that's memory. But what's really sophisticated is that later on, if they can use those three cues in different combinations to figure out something and find something like food, that's episodic like memory. They're episodically using it in different combinations, and that's really sophisticated. It takes humans 4 to 5 years of brain development before they can do that. That's how long the human brain has to, you know, form. And these animals do it right out of the egg. And the fact that an invertebrate animal has such a sophisticated ability with putting the what, where, and when together in different combinations later on, it's really mind-boggling. Only a few animals, have been shown to do that. Some corvid birds can do it, and a lot of the, primates can do that. But beyond that, not too many animals can do it. So, you know, I look at that and I go, yeah, that is really sophisticated stuff right there. That really sets them apart from a lot of other animals, including a lot of the fishes, which are pretty smart critters too. So I think in terms of the intelligence and so forth, that's one of them. But I have said, and I do believe that this idea, the capability of these animals to go out on, we actually measured this in a Tahiti coral reef. How many times does an octopus have to change color and pattern when it goes out for 2 hours to get food every day? Because it's totally exposed. It's making this phenomenon. It's making 2 to 300 color pattern camouflage changes over 2 hours. And each one is tailored to the specific little spot that it stopped in. And
Mhm.
that's decision making. That is not a reflex. It's analyze. It's like a high-speed computer working to look at that background and tailor that perfectly. And then it's doing it several hundred times in 2 hours. I mean, that's just stunning. Uh, you know, a human soldier is not capable of doing that in any way, shape, or form. So I think that's the kind of thing that I call intelligence because it takes a big brain. There's decision making going on continually, and it's really it's not a simple robotic thing at all. This is a
I can't
thinking,
even
cogitating
imagine.
creature.
I can't
Yeah.
even imagine anything else up on that level in the underwater or on land. Seriously, what you
Well,
just
there are. I
described.
mean, animals are really amazing. I mean, birds are really totally fascinating, but there are a lot of animals. I mean, dolphins do all kinds of cool stuff. There are plenty of animals that do neat stuff. It's just that they only developed and evolved this neat stuff capability in the ecology that that animal lives in. It's all based on that. The animals have to survive, they have to get food, and they have to reproduce. So, the ecological forces that are around them will bring these things out over time. And so it's just that this, I told you the cephalopods have been around longer than any other animal group, right from the beginning of what's been on the earth in forms of large organism, large organisms, period, all the way back to the Cambrian. So they've had a lot of time to deal with all these changes. The fact that it's an invertebrate animal is just so strange. That why did they never get a backbone? Who knows? But I showed you that evolutionary tree. It is the last common ancestor to a vertebrate animal is 600 million years ago, and that was a tiny little worm.
Hmm.
And so, how these things evolve and come to be is, one of the great mysteries of the planet.
Hmm. Wow. Well, thank you so much. Anyone else have any questions, comments?
I don't
Really?
have a question. I learned so much. It was so much to take in. It was fascinating, like about how using from their skin and the eyes on their skin and just all the shape shifting they can do. It was just like beautiful, incredible. I'm so interested for more now.
Oh, good. Thank you. I really appreciate the feedback. One of the things you might look at, I gave a TED talk back in 2019, and I summarized a lot of that stuff in 13 minutes. All TED talks are short. So you could just go on TED.com. You know what TED is? You know what, I don't know if you know what
Yeah.
TED is, but
Yeah.
TED.com, just go in there and put Roger and Octopus, and this thing will show up.
Okay.
Um, and so a lot of the things I told you in this talk are in that talk. So it'll be another chance to look at them in, a little different detail. So yeah,
This is-
it really is amazing. There's no shortage of questions to figure out with these animals and others.
So the octopuses can alter their RNA, I believe you said, right? Yeah.
Well, that's through time from one generation to the other. Yes, yeah. Well,
Yep.
the whole, a lot of animals can change, and but your DNA can change too. If you pick up a new capability that gets encoded in the DNA, and that's how evolution works. But I'm talking about single individual popping out of the egg, and it's the DNA is sending out RNA sequences to make proteins for every organ system in your body, including the brain, and that can be edited from the DNA. So there's the change capability kind of on the fly seems to be phenomenal in these animals, whereas other animals can't do that. They can't make that on the fly change at the level of DNA and RNA and individual proteins being made. But I forgot to mention that most of that heavy change that's been quantified is for nervous tissue, like neurons and brains. So it means their nervous system changeability capability seems to be extraordinary compared to any animal on the planet. Maybe that's one reason they get this adaptability and they've been able to survive through so many geological epochs and all the things that have happened to this planet life-wise. Um, this is this is guesswork now, but the fact that you see this happening at the molecular level cannot be ignored.
Okay. I think that answered the question. I don't think we really know the reason for this. It's an evolutionary kind of
Oh
capability
yeah,
that they've.
yeah. I'm just giving you the best guess. That's all. These are really tough questions, but uh, this is the kind of thing that a lot of scientists and philosophers spend a lot of time thinking about. You look around you and you go, where did all this place come from? Well, some people can just decide that God made it all happen. But if you want to look at the real life and the molecules and everything else, we'll get some other insights and you can decide for yourself.
Well, I'll never look at an octopus the same way again. That's for sure.
Me either.
You know, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Roger. It was amazing, Dr. Hanlon. I mean,
My
your
pleasure.
knowledge, your passion for this amazing life. Um, and everyone for being here tonight. We know that there's a lot going on in our area and outside our area, and hopefully this brought a little bit of a distraction and fun. And yeah, we hope to see you guys next month. So thank you. If you have any suggestions for speakers or need any more information, I'll be posting it. And with that, I'll go ahead and stop the recording.
Okay, Barbara, thanks for everything. I appreciate it. Good luck to everybody.
Absolutely.